Doing my homework for the interview, I did come across Brett Premack's interviews with your brother, and I thought those were great. I thought those were among the best source materials.
Yeah.
But what I was hoping we could do is just get your perspective on your dad, your brother, and you talk about things that you're doing now.
That's absolutely fine.
Later on in my life, I became familiar with your father as a musician and as a bassist. As a kid, I remember watching his Little Rascals show, and your brother, Duffy, I remember first from early Modern Drummer magazine, where they did a profile on him, and I can remember him sitting behind his set of Tama drums. So where I wanted to start was that your brother had a great quote. This came out of Brett's interview with him too. I thought it was a good place for us to start. He said, paraphrasing now, but he said, "Remember that I started out with a father who was a bass player with great timekeeping, exceptional timekeeping. He wasn't known as a great soloist like Duffy said Mingus or Ray Brown, he named specifically, but he was a great timekeeper." And so I thought that would be a great place to begin with your dad. And I know about your dad, but I'm guessing a lot of listeners probably don't know about your father and his.
Yeah.
So if you could talk about your dad, is the highlights of his career, that would be a great start.
Okay. Well, I don't even know where to begin.
I know. I think he was certainly one of the great bass players of jazz. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, and he was known as the cheerleader in the Woody Herman Orchestra, and he was definitely an actor and a comedian underneath that guise of being a wonderful bassist. And he would implement that into his performance, and the audience loved that.
Yep, and he was with my first, I'm trying to think, well, other than his television program where he played bass, where he had the faces painted on his bass. When I really began immersing myself in jazz, and I had a record, Woody Herman's Greatest Hits, it was on the Columbia label, and listening to the Thundering Herd there, and the bass playing was just so powerful, so phenomenal. And can you talk about that? Do you have a sense of where that came from, how your dad ended up playing bass as he did, who influenced him, and what did he create maybe new about playing bass that no one had done before him?
Well, yes, I can. Arnold Fishkin was his best friend, and he sold my father his first bass for $3, and he called it Bessie. And Arnold basically, showed him the ropes, how to play it, and, to get a feel of the bass and strings and so forth. And that was really his first story, because he started on clarinet and decided that wasn't for him. So when Arnold said, "Hey, why don't you want to start playing the bass here?" and he sold him the bass. And that's how it all started, quite frankly.
Okay.
And he said that night, which is unbelievable to think it's true, but he said that night he played a gig on that bass and didn't even know what he was playing or what he was doing. It was just some gig. Okay. I don't remember what it was. It was some gig that he, had the balls to get up and play the bass. And he was all over the place. And he claimed it was the most fun he ever had, but he said he didn't know what the hell he was doing.
Of course, in those days, basses were felt more than heard, right?
Yeah. That's where the timekeeper came in, I guess. Yeah. He just kept the time. But yeah, that's a very funny story. The one thing that I have to preface here is that my mother and father got divorced when I was 8 years old, and he was traveling the world. So there was a pocket of time in my life that I didn't know exactly what my father was doing out there. I didn't know how famous he was out there and how people loved him until later on. But when you mention his TV show, with the bass with the face. And that was, a show for children where he introduced jazz to kids. And I was on that show. I have a picture of myself standing there holding a cue card that says Chubby Jackson presents Chubby's Follies on his show. And I would dance, with the other kids and, had my hair cut on it once on his TV show. And he just loved kids. He loved bringing music to kids. That was the one thing, which then brought him into education later on. But I just wanted to give you that information because Duffy knew more about my dad than I did. And so I would always go to him and say, tell me stories, because from the age of 8 to 18, I didn't have my father.
Wow, that's a big gap.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, just for a side note, I decided when I was 18, I went and lived with my father and brother and, ended up working at the Musicians Union Local 47 and meeting all these people who knew him and had stories about him. And I was, the life of my father started to come into full form for me as an adult.
Okay. So you have a sister and the brother, Duffy, correct?
Yes, I have an older sister. Her name is Mino.
Okay.
M-Y-N-O.
You three did not grow up in the same household together?
We grew up until 8 years old. My sister is 4 years older than me. So, yeah, the family split at that point. And my brother went and lived with my father.
Oh.
And he was, he was only 10. So he got the basic teachings from my dad. My sister and I, really didn't. We had to, go other routes to exercise our musical potentials, which we both did.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. The quote I came across from the Brett Primack interview is that Duffy said, the main thing is I'm the son of a bass player.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was great. I thought that was really good, and Duffy was pretty consistent and with interviewers in relaying his life story, talking about driving in a car with your dad, scat singing, trading 2s and 4s, and he playing brushes on the dashboard while your dad sang. But you missed all that. You weren't part of that.
No, I really wasn't. I wasn't, because when Duffy would share those stories, I would be just as amazed to hear the experiences that he had. When he said he was, just the son of a bass player, he used to call himself SOBP.
He said they were the only father-son bass drum duo in jazz.
Yeah, and there's a video that you might want to look at. I've Got a Secret interview that Duffy, that was his first TV performance, and leading his own jazz band. It's the most adorable thing you've ever seen. He comes out with an ice cream cone that's melting all over his hand.
Yeah. I think I've actually seen that show with Duffy, and that was a great show. And
yeah, it was precious. It's beautiful to see, how he started and the innocence in his heart as well as the passion for the music.
Yeah. So when did you and Duffy, when did you reconnect?
The day I turned 18, I got on a plane and went to go live with both of them in Burbank, California.
Okay.
And it was, my father was running a jazz club called the Jazz Estate. And it was an introduction for me to see the life that they had both been living. And it blew my mind because, I was meeting, Harry Sweets Edison and all these jazz greats, Earl Palmer and Blue Mitchell. And I didn't know who any of these people were. Mm-hmm. But they were happy to meet me. and it was, all of a sudden I had this family of jazz that was, giving me love, an entree into the industry for the very first time. And it kind of blew my mind because not only was the music impeccable, it was a learning curve for me. And so, that's when I had to get a job. So I started working at the Musicians Union and working for Nathan Scott in the motion picture division and learning about that and how musicians get paid for that. And then I moved to the TV and radio division and learned that. And then when I left there, I went and ran a recording studio. So I was teaching myself the industry by way of, the work that I had looked into.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe a day or a week in that household that you came into when you were 18 years old?
Yeah, the very first thing, it was a cottage that they were living in, but there was a studio in the back that Duffy had kept for himself, where he played and had his own personal life there. And my father was in the main house. And when I got there, the very first thing I thought was, this place needs a woman's touch. And so I started cleaning and moving furniture, and you get my groove into the house, and there was music constantly, and they were going out for gigs or studio sessions or this and that, and see you later, have dinner ready. It was family oriented, and a learning scenario for me about who they were at this age and stage, and I was recreating a relationship with them at the age of 18 that was brand new to me, but yet familiar, if that makes any sense.
Okay. So you were a welcome presence, and how was that established? I mean, you must have had, you didn't just show up at the door unannounced. You must have been in touch with your dad prior to, right?
Yeah, Dad knew I was coming, and they were ready for me. They were excited, and they showed me all around the city and drove me through Mulholland Drive, took me to different jazz clubs and so forth, and introduced me to everybody. And I was so well received, and I used to say to my father, I would say, Dad, your cronies are hitting on me. And he would say to me, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about that. You're gorgeous, and, just learn how to fend them off. One of those kind of things. And I was definitely welcomed with a lot of love and a lot of care and protection in a new city. And that was the first time I've left home, that kind of thing. And,
yeah.
And they just sort of gave me, the ropes, and loved me through it. And we had a lot of fun. When the family got together, it was always jamming. Duffy was on piano, Dad was on bass, and Dad would be whistling melodies in the background, and it was always fun. We always laughed and had fun, is how I remember our family to be.
Okay.
And there's so much more to that.
Did Dad and Duffy have any kind of a regular practice routine during the week?
Duffy was always playing something. He was, we would call him the round robin musician, because he'd go from piano, bass to drums. And yeah, I mean, they were always impromptu, it just seemed, and at home, but when they would go out for work, obviously that was, scheduled. But no, music was always on, and they're always talking music. My father was one who would constantly be creating new ways of setting performances. Mm-hmm. And he had the most innovative ideas. And he always wanted to see them happen, and he wanted to see them happen now.
Duffy talked about Don Lamond as his first teacher, a drummer that he idolized. And after listening to the Duffy interviews, there are two drummers that were very well connected with your father that I didn't hear Duffy mention anywhere. And those two, Dave Tuff, of course, is one, and Tiny Kahn is the second one. Both just phenomenal, great drummers in the jazz drumming hierarchy. And do those two drummers play at all in your memories or your life experience with the family?
Don Lamond for sure. Don Lamond, because remember, I was still young, but a lot of these musicians would come to the house and just hang out after the gigs. I would remember hearing voices downstairs in the kitchen and laughing and joking, and they would all come over to the house afterwards. But Don Lamond, I remember vividly, more like an uncle. He came over to the house a lot, and they would start jamming. Duffy would take the bongos and start to play time, And there was always a drum set up and Dad's bass set up and a piano that whoever came in, could just go over and start playing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that as a small child.
Okay. Any talk about Tiny Kahn, Dave Tough?
Dad used to talk about them, but not Duffy. I don't remember Duffy talking about them, but Dad talked about them all the time with, different experiences of playing with them. But I don't remember meeting them. I remember meeting Gene Krupa.
Yeah.
At a jazz club in Long Island. It was called the Cork and Bib, and I was very young, and I vividly remember him dressed to the max, gorgeous silver hair, crystal blue eyes, and I remember him bending down to me, meeting me, and I remember looking at him like, "Oh, you are so handsome." That's one that I remember for sure. But yeah, there were so many different musicians that were coming through, and as I mentioned, some of them I had no clue who they were.
Yeah,
they were just some people Daddy worked with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned, I think one of the first times while we were exchanging text messages, that you're working on a book, or there is a book in progress, a biography about your father.
Yeah, it's called In the Key of Me, A Jazz Legacy Reclaimed, because I had to learn who my family was out there in the world.
Yep.
And people were coming to me with such grace and honor, and I was like, I'm just another human being. Why are you treating me like that? And it was because I was part of jazz royalty.
Yep.
And I had to learn about the depth of what they gave to the people. And the more and more, I was just, scanning some stuff this morning, and my eyes filled up of all the accomplishments that both of them, did.
Yeah.
And I felt very proud.
Yeah.
very
So
proud.
talk about yourself. What is your musical background? How do you fit into the Jackson family story?
Well, I used to love to sing. Growing up, I was in my, select choir, and I loved to play congas, percussion. And I knew I had that rhythm in me because it came so effortlessly. And when I started working for Willard Alexander's office, I was in charge of, was the best well-known jazz agency in New York City on Madison Avenue. I was Willard Alexander's right-hand girl. And I was in all the meetings about all the bookings and all the tours, and I had to keep all the contracts together. And one of the artists that I had to keep together was Buddy Rich. And, I had learned about Buddy Rich at that point because I was older at this point. And he was a dear friend of my father's and, played with him as well. And he was always out on tour. And I would have to call him and say, there's some contracts on my desk here that need to be signed. And you're out there. Do you want me to Federal Express them to you? What would you like me to do? And he said, no, you go ahead and you sign my name. Buddy Rich put your initials. And it would be J3. I was known as J3. And I was petrified to sign those because I never knew if he would come back and say, I never told you to sign that. And then I'd be in trouble. So there was one day that he was scheduled to come into the office. He was in town. And he had an apartment across from Lincoln Center in the ASCAP building, which I ended up living with his daughter Kathy there, which is another story. So he came in and he brought a whole bunch of bow tie pastries. And he's sitting there eating them with all this powdered sugar all over his face, his nose, on his shirt, and he didn't care. And I'm going through, can I sign Wolf Trap? Can I sign this? Can I sign that? And he said, yeah, go ahead. And as he's munching these pastries. And at one point he said to me, you need to know my daughter because I think the two of you would really get along great. And I said, okay. And he says, I'm flying out to go do the Tonight Show out to L.A., so why don't you, call her and the two of you can watch the show together. I said, okay. So we're done with the contracts there. And I reach out to Kathy and I go and I meet her at their apartment. And we watch Buddy on the show. And the two of us had so much in common because we were both jazz kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we were motor mouthing to each other different stories and laughing and so forth. And she and I, there was a song that my sister was given, and I really liked it. And I said, listen to this song. And the two of us just started to harmonize together, and we started singing the melody, and we looked at each other like, damn, we sound good. And then Buddy called, and he's like, what are you girls doing? And we said, we're singing this. We're trying to learn this song. And he said, let me hear it. And so we let him hear it, and he said, okay, the two of you are going on tour with us. On the next tour, we're going to England. I almost pooped my pants when I heard that. That wasn't anything that I was even thinking would ever occur in my life. So long story short, Kathy and I said, okay, let's get serious about this. Let's put a group together. We found two other vocalists to join the group, and it was entitled Z-E-E. And I was the manager of the group because I had the business experience.
And you sang as well? You were...
Yeah, I was part of the group. And I was still working at Will Alexander's office as they were, rehearsing and stuff, and I was feeling kind of out of sorts because I wasn't at those rehearsals because I had to do my job. And so I had to, have a crash course. And one of the very first gig that we did was at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And it was the first of a series of putting music in between during the intermission of the basketball games. So the joint was filled. And I get chills even telling you this because this was my really first performance. I just got a flashback of one other thing at the Baked Potato, which I could say is my first, but as far as a major gig. And I remember we went out and we performed it, and all of a sudden, we're doing the rock, that dance, and, to the music, and I was so nervous, my knees were shaking. I almost didn't get up out of that rock dance. And cameras, and we were on cable, and I was like, it was so fast-paced performance, and the audience loved it. And so after that gig, I'm getting flashbacks now. After that gig, we did another gig. So I just got the visual of Monty Alexander. He came to that performance and came over to me like, you did great. But there was another gig that we had scheduled. That it was a club. I can't remember the name of it. And we had to rehearse a little bit before because of me, because I was working and I needed to have a little rehearsal. And imagine this. We went into the ladies' room, the four girls and Buddy. And Buddy played the walls in the women's bathroom. And the acoustics in there were perfect. And I said to myself, if anybody could see what we're doing right now, it was a classic moment because Buddy was playing his ass off on the wall. And so then we went out and we did it. But I'll never forget the moment. We were singing 1 O'Clock Jump, and it was, fast-paced, lyrics. And I didn't remember all the lyrics, so...
Oops.
There I was. But I got through it, but it was embarrassing. I'll never forget that. And then I thought to myself, if you want to be serious, you can't have a day job. You got to go straight forward into singing. But when we were preparing to go on tour, I remember sitting with Willard Alexander and thanking him for everything that he taught me, and that it was time for me to exercise a part of myself that I didn't even know I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And he gave me grace and said, go for it. Go do it. Well, we all got ready to go. We're talking about when I moved into Buddy Rich's apartment in Manhattan. And I ended up with his bedroom. And so, Kathy and I were sort of moving his things, around so I could put some of my things in there. And I went to the bathroom, and I had to go to the bathroom. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, I'm sitting on Buddy Rich's throne right now. cracking myself up. So I wanted to call my father and say, Dad, guess where I am? And so when I went to finish what I was doing, there was no toilet paper. So as I'm sitting on the throne, I reach around underneath the bathroom sink to see if there's anything there. And the very first thing that I grabbed was Buddy's toupee. Oh. And I sat there for a minute, and I said to myself, are you going to do it? But I didn't. But it was a moment that I sat there giggling. My father loved the story. That I would possibly, wipe myself with his toupee. But that was a moment that I will never forget, and is a classic story as far as I'm concerned. But I did find other paper.
Good.
But, living in his room and the vibration in his house and just looking at his videotapes and the things that he used to like to watch. And during that time, he did the Muppet Show with Animal.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yeah.
It was during that time, so we were all excited to get to see that video. It was during that time. But yeah, there's quite a few stories when he would come in off the road. I remember cooking breakfast for everybody, and when it was time to sit down, I served everybody. Buddy sat at the head of the table, and when it was time to sit down for myself, my eggs were not on my plate. They were in Buddy's hand. He took his hand, and he took my scrambled eggs and took a big wad of them, and then, just sat there. And everybody was quiet at the table waiting for my reaction, and I acted like he didn't do it, and I just started eating the bacon. I'll never forget that story, too. But living with Buddy Rich was definitely an experience, because not only was he funny, but he was also dark. Mm-hmm. He would sit there quietly in his bathrobe, just clicking through channels and whatever. And a very serious man. What
musically did you take away from your time with Buddy? That and then that's just from a drummer's perspective, but Buddy as the great musician that he was, were there musical things about a career in music that you learned from Buddy that you kept?
Well, yes, professionalism was the first thing, because he demanded that from the people that worked with him, and it was a structured system that was adhered to. And not only, I got to watch from backstage every night his impeccableness, that would just blow me away, and how effortless his gift was, and how he commanded his gift, and what he commanded from the players as a cohesive unit. It was awesome to watch and to be taught, really how to be the most professional. You can't take away anything from all of his knowledge. I was in awe of him most of the time, and he was like another father to me. Okay. It wasn't like I was in awe of who he was. He was, extended family. Mm-hmm. And so I saw the inner workings of him off and on the bandstand as an extended family member. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot from him in reference to, growing a spine musically.
I'm surprised at your stories that I would have imagined that Buddy would have been very meticulous about contracts, that if he was unable to read a contract himself because he was on the road, that there would have been, and maybe it was you, somebody that he really trusted to read over those contracts.
It was me.
It was you.
It was me.
Okay.
And I had to go through the writers because I knew exactly what he would say no to, and I'd have to circle him or, exit out and then put his initials and my initials. And I would always tell him, but he never caught me in anything that I did wrong. I always made sure that I, dotted the I's and crossed the T's before I would call him and say, we got this. And sometimes he would say to me, I'm not signing that. And he'd use some profanities. And he would tell me what he would want the agent to go back to, the festival or whoever it was, the buyer, and ask for more money. And sometimes he would get it and sometimes he didn't. And he would end up accepting it because it was a clutch date of, that he could hit on tour. But no, he did trust me. He did trust me, and I took that very seriously. And because the last thing I wanted to do was have Buddy Rich yell at me.
Yeah. I don't believe it. I remember seeing him. Went to see his big band at Eisenhower Park on Long Island, and the band finished the second set, took a break, and came back for set number 2, and the whole band, they start filling in the chairs and things, and then Buddy comes out, and applause, and he starts to actually count off the tune with his hi-hat, playing, and he glances over, and one of the sax players hasn't come back yet, and Buddy stops. Where's Joe Smith? And the band's shrugging shoulders, and so they wait a second, and a moment later, Joe Smith with his alto comes running back and hurries to his seat and makes sure he's got the chart and sits down. He's ready to play, and Buddy's still looking at him, and he says, "I hope you enjoy your last night with the band."
Ooh.
And I bet it was the kids' last night with the band.
Yeah. I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
You know how many bass players he went through?
Ugh.
It was that was horrifying. And my father played with him. He went for a stint where they couldn't find a bass player, and they called my father. And I remember my father, calling saying, "Why did I do this?" Because he's your friend and he was in a pinch. That's why.
Yeah. Had you met Buddy before you were 18 and working for Woody Alexander? Was he at your dad's place jamming or just hanging out?
No, I didn't meet him until I was 18 or so.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew of him for sure, but I hadn't met him, and he was a household name, obviously, but no. But when I met him, I had learned, about the relationship he had with my dad, and so it became very familiar. And that's what it was like for me with all these jazz greats. When I said I didn't know who they were, they all received me as if I was part of the family, and I got a lot of backstage moments.
Yeah.
That other people wouldn't, and I didn't realize that I was sitting with all this hierarchy until I learned about who they were and listened to their music.
Yeah.
And then I felt important.
Yeah.
And lucky.
Yeah. Players like that like when people are genuine with them, that they're not, goo goo gaga because of who they are or their reputation. It's just a human being that happens to play great.
Yeah. So I had some wonderful, wonderful experiences, and you're sparking some of these memories as we speak.
Circling back a little bit here, and I hate to use that phrase, circling back, but now that I've done it, we'll leave it in. Did you have ties? Did you work at all with Duffy in his career as he moved through? He was just with some great bands, big bands and small bands.
Oh, yeah. I managed Duffy for years, which was not easy.
Why?
Because he loved music so much, what he did, that as a manager and booking him, and I would, offer, him for a certain amount for whatever it constituted. And then, I'd say, yes, Duffy can definitely speak with you about the charts we'd be sending, what you'd have your kids, rehearsing and blah, blah. So when Duffy would, speak to the music director, Duffy would end up saying, "Oh, my sister told you this much, I'll do it for this." Oh. And I would say, "Duff, what are you doing?" Mm-hmm. And he'd go, "Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of felt like they couldn't meet the budget you were asking for." And I said, "That's my job. That's not yours." And so we bumped heads a couple of times, and I always did what he asked me to do, but I tried to show him other ways to negotiate his excellence. But yeah, no, we were known as Sissingbro Incorporated in the industry because we would go to, you know, the different music conventions, and he was the in-house drummer for the National Association of Jazz Educators Convention before it turned into the International Association.
Okay.
And at that time, we had formed a company called Quality House International, where we were offering jazz musicians as clinicians to these high schools and universities. And it was my job, and I had 27 musicians at one point. And yeah, and I remember I was representing Bob Brookmeyer.
Okay.
And I had to learn about all these guys and their background. And I remember saying to myself, I don't want to be a manager anymore, because all it is professional babysitting.
Really?
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me, you know, because I was working with 27 musicians. Everybody had a different scenario with their life, their family, their this, their that, to the point where, you know, they were looking for different gigs, you know, and would call me, you know, like, the electric bill is due, you know, can you help us out? And these were well-known artists. And I just kind of felt the pressure of those different scenarios. And I didn't really want to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be more of an influencer and promotion, and getting these artists out there and showing them the ropes, because a lot of these musicians were very talented musicians, but they weren't business savvy.
Yeah.
And I ran up against that a lot. So, you know, I talk about a structure and a system template that I used for most of these artists. And at one point, I had Harry Sweets Edison saying to me, you want to take control of all my music? Freddie Hubbard did the same thing with me. You want to go in my garage and see all this music that I have, and let's start it. And I was like, I don't do that, Freddie. Can you ask somebody else to do that? And when you do that, then I can jump in. But I'm not a grunt work person like that. So I had some amazing opportunities to not only assist the legendary people, but the up-and-comers. Mm-hmm. So that's when there was a night that it was 2 a.m, and I just moved to Las Vegas, and I couldn't sleep. I was supposed to go to New York to be the roving reporter for the jazz convention in New York, and I forget the name of it now. And then they canceled it for some reason. And I'm looking on my computer, and I was invited to a social network that was outside of Facebook and the others that was geared toward TV and motion pictures. Now, we didn't get to the point when I stepped out of the music business for a little while. I ended up running, assisting the person who ran a boutique company called International Creative Exchange, where we did co-productions of different documentaries and episodic libraries and so forth. I wanted to try something new, and so I got into TV and film international distribution. So I learned that game and co-productions. And I was the assistant to Oliver DeCourson, who was the one who launched Disney Channel. The owner of the company was Ron Miller, who used to be the CEO of Disney before Eisner came in. And it was a boutique company. And I learned the game. So I added that to my repertoire of knowing the industry, musicians for different projects in TV and film. So I've tapped different areas of the industry and felt like I was getting a full knowledge that I could fall into any one of those, extend my career. I did that for 8 years. And then I left, had a baby. Oh, I know where I was going with this. Go back to when it was 2 o'clock in the morning and I was invited to a social network because it was TV and film. That's why my email was there. And I'm looking around this, and everybody was talking amongst themselves about the industry and all the subsets, from director of photography to wardrobe and makeup and this and that. And I said to myself at that moment, jazz needs this.
Oh, okay.
And I saw this live link that said, create your own network. And I said, okay. And so I hit it, and I'm, changing the colors, and I'm labeling the different categories, and it was just coming through me like butter.
Wow.
And then when I felt like it was set, there was another hyperlink that said, invite your friends. So I clicked that, it scanned my database, and I went to bed. I got up the next morning and went to go see more of that. And do I need to tell you that there were more than 200 people in there talking amongst themselves?
Wow, no kidding, overnight?
And setting up their pages and making comments on each other's. And then they started inviting their friends to it because they had the same invite button. And I sat there and my heart was pumping. And I said, Lord God, what did I just create? And that's the beginning of the Jazz Network. Okay,
so that was on LinkedIn. That's where you set up that forum?
Yeah, I actually I had the Jazz Network out there for 17 years, and it was growing and growing, and I was featuring artists all over the place, and people had their pages on sort of like a Facebook of jazz. And then I was noticing that people were coming in and stealing my ideas and bringing them all over to Facebook.
Oh man!
And I thought, okay, well that means that there's something else happening here. And the other thing was, a lot of people were coming in to the Jazz Network, and they were claiming their music was jazz when it clearly wasn't. I had to stop that because I think my father would smack me if he would know that I let this person in.
Yep.
And so that's when I decided to create the Not Just Jazz Network for those people that combine their music and blend it with different genres, cultures, flavors, whatever.
Yeah.
And that started to take off for me. So then I made it the Jazz Network worldwide, introducing the Not Just Jazz Network.
Okay.
So I run both of them. It got to the point where I didn't want to do that anymore either.
Yeah.
It was time to move on. But I kept it going. So I brought it over to LinkedIn.
Okay.
And everybody's talking amongst themselves and they're promoting. I mean, you see it.
Yep.
So I'm still doing what I did, but not as much hands-on as I did in the past now 18 years. It got to the point that, the labor pains of it all, came every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was done with that. I found myself more consulting artists.
Mm-hmm.
And learning the video world, as far as promos and how they're presenting themselves to the marketplace. I went off and started doing some entertainment direction, doing different industrials, and hiring all my friends and so forth. I tapped almost every side. The only area I didn't tap was publishing. That was like speaking German to me. I didn't like it at all. But, today I do consulting. I do video promos for new releases. I'll do press releases. I'll send out to festivals for artists and do voiceovers on their releases and stuff like that.
These are jazz artists exclusively, or no? Are you branching out into different genres?
I could do it for any genre, but I want to sort of stay where I'm the best at, which is jazz and not just jazz. I don't really do smooth jazz artists.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
I don't do. Good. But if I see and discover some up and comers who are really saying something and have their own unique style, I'll go out of my way to make sure that they're seen and heard. And I try to launch careers, but I don't really stay with them because I don't want to manage. Yeah, I'm just a stop along the way. I mean, there are definitely combinations and blends that are definitely workable out there. But some of them, to me, it's instrumental R&B, and I get bored.
Yeah. Your brother said, had another great quote in his Brett Premack interview. He said that people are starving for the groove I love to play. Now I need to know how to market myself a little better in the industry.
Yeah, and Duffy was not a businessman. Neither was my father. And when I started, learning their industry, I was like pulling their coattails going, wait a minute, let me put my foot in it.
Yeah.
So I sort of became the business person for the family. And still today, people come to me in reference to both of them and have questions about who they are and what they did. And But Duffy leaving this earth really hit home. That was a rough one.
That was, I mean, obviously because he was your brother and you loved him, but other parts of that hit hard.
Yeah. Well, number one, I miss him dearly. He and I were very close, and we had the stupidest sense of humor together. We went everywhere together. And when I couldn't go, I would always make sure that my hand was on it in some way to make sure he was protected out there. And he did the same thing for me. You know, he was the big brother who protected me.
Okay.
From all the musicians that were hitting on me, because that was definitely something that was problematic, because I was young and beautiful.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's
you know, I call myself the Sally Field of jazz. They liked me. They really liked me. And almost to the point where I had to call my father and say, "Can you call them and tell them to stop?"
Yeah.
But that was part of it. I did deal with that. But Duffy was definitely my protector, and I just miss him. I miss the fun, the jokes, the practical jokes that we would pull on each other when he would come home off the road with the Count Basie band and take his shoes off after coming, you know, from Paris and the flight and the walk. The whole house would smell like his feet.
Yeah.
And we would make a joke out of it, like, "Damn, can you leave your shoes outside?" And he would say, "Do you know how many stages I played with those shoes on?"
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you some personal stuff, but it was very funny. It was like, "Oh, Duffy's coming home off tour, leave the shoes outside." No, we had a lot of fun. He created fun wherever he went. And the same thing with my father. He had a great sense of humor. And I remember my stepmother at my father's memorial, when she got up to speak, she said, wherever we went together, if we got separated through the crowd or people greeting him or whatever, she said, and I would hear laughter, I would know that that's where he was.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was a perfect depiction of who my father was. And the same thing with Duffy. They both had a wonderful sense of humor, and their camaraderie of spirit was so locked. And when they would get up on the bandstand and play together, the spirit of the band was fun. My father never liked it when a musician would stand there the way he would put it, with the cocked eyelids and you know, leaning their hip over and their back to the audience. He never appreciated that style of performance. Mm-hmm. He felt, you know, face your audience. They paid money to see you, and give them the show that they're hoping to see, instead of ignoring them and just, you know, working with the musicians off each other.
Yeah.
And Duffy was a showman. Wherever he went, he was comical, and he put that into his music, you know, into his playing. And he was always so gracious in meeting people when he was sweating and, you know, just getting off the bandstand. And he was all about the people and sharing love, as he was known as the Johnny Appleseed of jazz.
That's what he told Brett. He said in there, too, he said the philosophy of the Jacksons is put the grin on the groove and aim the beat at your feet.
Right. And it's, you know, like when Duffy was playing with Lionel Hampton, if you haven't seen the drum battle that he did with Lionel Hampton at Disneyland, you might want to look that up on YouTube.
Yeah, I have not seen that one. I will.
Oh, it's going to blow your mind. It's and the way the people responded to that, and just the energy of the two of them working off of each other was just amazing. You have to see it in order to experience it. But everybody was up and dancing, and that's what Duffy was all about. He brought joy everywhere he went, even though he was going through his own personal trials with his health.
Yep.
And that was a struggle, because I was his nurse most of the time and brought him through a lot. He really had an iron will. So did my father. You know, the show must go on. The same thing with Buddy. You know, when Buddy's back would go out, and they would have to carry him onto the bandstand, and he would play his butt off, and then they have to carry him off. That was just amazing to me, how they would get up and go when they really didn't feel like it, because it was all for the people. I'm just trying to keep not only their legacy alive, but also aligning with today's music, today's artists. And I just recently, when you asked me what I'm doing now, because I'm getting older, I don't want to work as hard. The bottom line of it is, I created a curriculum called Students in Motion. And I did this a while back, and I let it sit for a minute until I met Pat Melfi, who used to be the VP of MCA Records for 30 years. And we became good friends, and he had a similar vision, bringing... What he would do is he would extract these young artists who were, virtuosos at a very young age, and he would present them to an audience. He has a nonprofit called Muse Art World Foundation. And he invited me to bring my curriculum through his nonprofit. So I did that, and we're working on that right now, and I'm very proud of it. It's definitely going to be an online school, and a lot of the artists, most of my following is international. I would say more international than domestic, because I think jazz is more appreciated internationally. And I'm going to, seek out those instructors. And so we're going to be teaching all over the world through Students in Motion and Muse Art World Foundation. So I'm excited about that. That's the newest thing on my plate right now.
Is there a launch date?
Right now we're building the structure and the system of it.
Yeah.
So the curriculum is basically done, right down to evaluation sheets of the different artists that will come through, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. I would say probably the beginning of next year.
Okay.
Pat is all about teaching these young artists what the business is, know what a royalty is, know what your contracts and what your provisions are, and all of that conversation, because many of them are coming up and they know none of that and they get ripped off.
Yeah.
So that's what we're here to do, is to secure the young up-and-comers and let them understand what their livelihood is really about business-wise, and also, musically from their heart. That's another part of what this curriculum is the business of music. If you want to be an agent, if you want to be a manager, if you want to be an entertainment attorney, we're teaching them all of the facets that they can choose from.
Oh, interesting.
Right down to music licensing and so forth, where their music is, how it can grow into other areas of the industry. And I didn't miss a beat. I think anything that I've ever learned as I've been reclaiming my own, jazz legacy, I think that it's something that I can leave behind as a part of the Jackson family and what they poured into the world. So that's where my heart is right now. And I'll keep you posted as to, the launching of it and how it's all coming into form.
Great.
And
would a place like Berkeley be competition, for this, or no? You doing something you see as much different?
I think it's different because we're going to be bringing in celebrity artistry as well, artist in residence, doing their curriculums and so forth. That I think that touch is going to draw a lot of, students, because they love, George Benson or, that kind of thing. It's like Samara Joy. Have you heard her?
Yes, man, oh man. What a singer.
There's Sarah Vaughan right there. It's I have a funny Sarah Vaughan story at the Baked Potato in California. Those classic moments, sort of like the one that I told you with Buddy Rich and I went to the bathroom. This is another bathroom story. There's one bathroom at the Baked Potato, and I had to go. So I go up the hallway, I go in, and there's one lady standing in front of me, but somebody was in the stall. The person standing in front of me was Sarah Vaughan.
Okay.
And I thought, the two of us are sitting here listening to this lady pee and not saying anything to each other than just an acknowledgement, hello. And the lady walks out, washes her hands, and then there goes Sarah into the stall. And I was the only one left. And I said to myself, I'm sitting here listening to Sarah Vaughan pee. And she even pees in key. And I just was laughing to myself that these are the kind of moments that somebody else would probably laugh to if they found themselves there. But yeah, that moment. And she came out and sort of nodded at me. And then I went to go do my thing. And I said, now I'm sitting on a toilet that Sarah Vaughan just got up from. It was one of those, you can see my sense of humor.
Yeah. Definitely. For sure.
But it was a real moment.
There's another singer that I just ended up buying her out, Stella Cole. Do you know that name?
No, I haven't heard her yet, but I'll look into her.
Yeah, she just... I'm kind of a believer in that trying to recreate music of the 30s, 40s, 50s is, I wouldn't say impossible, but pretty close to it, because that was the sound, the music of that time. And the people playing it, that was them. And for somebody in 2025 to try to be playing Apple Honey or just it's different. The music, the instruments were different, all of that. So anyways, Stella Cole, I just caught online. She's a young lady, and she does a great job, I think, with singing the standards. And it's and I don't often say that about people who sing standard, that she's got an authenticity about her and a respect for the music and the tunes that I liked. So, and I have no financial interest in Stella Cole. Just a couple of days ago, I was listening. I said, "Wow,
No, thanks for sharing her, because I'd love to learn about new artists that are coming up and innovative with their sound and who they were influenced by. And Dad always used to say, be an originator, not an imitator.
Yes.
And find your own voice.
Yep.
Let them influence you, but find your own voice within it. And I believed in that. I wanted to mention to you the Great Day in Harlem, photo.
Yeah.
And my father is in that. We all came to New York to be a part of the reenactment of that photo that Life magazine sponsored with BET.
Okay.
And we went up to the actual stoop that all those musicians stood on, and there were so few left. They went into their original spots in that picture, and it was such an odd feeling inside to see how many people have left us.
Yeah.
I had created a shirt for my father on the front. I used to paint sweatshirts, Great Day in Harlem, and I put on the back, Chubby's Back, which was an album that he had done. But I said Chubby's Back for life. And then I had all the musicians that were the lasting survivors of that shot sign that shirt with a gold marker.
Wow.
I still have it to this day. It's worth something. It's worth a lot to me. But what that was like, to be a part of that, once they took that shot that Gordon Parks had taken, the famous photographer,
yeah,
we all corralled into a bus and then went into Long Island City to the Silver Cup Studios, where all the artists of today were waiting for us to come so we could take a picture with the integration of From Then Till Now kind of scenario.
Wow.
It touched me. I get chills even telling you. I have pictures which I can send to you of that time, and Lionel Hampton was there. James Moody. Al Jarreau. I can keep going to Korea. And to have all of that talent in one room was mind-boggling. And then when it came time to take that picture, it became the centerfold of Life magazine. And out of all of those musicians that showed up, the only two musicians that they pulled out of that were my father and brother.
What do you mean pulled out of it?
Well, keyed them out in the articles. Who they were and their influence in jazz and so forth. And there were so many influential jazz musicians there. I was just taken with the fact that, Life magazine picked my dad and my brother, and to key them out from that big crowd and write about them in the article. So this was the time when Krista McCullough, went up into the spaceship and it blew up.
Yeah.
The cover of the magazine was supposed to be this jazz moment, and that was wiped off, and Krista McCullough was put on the cover.
Wow.
Which is understandable, of course, but they did a centerfold in it for this particular event. So you can see it, and they did the illustration of the line drawing of who was who and what number, who was standing, so they can identify everybody in that. It was a moment in time that I think I'll never forget, because in the hotel that we were put in, it was directly across the street from the Uris Theater that we looked down on it. And I saw my father standing there wistfully looking at it. And I said to him, Dad, what are you thinking right now? And he said, I'm thinking that my father performed at the Uris Theater, and when he was done with his performance, he walked off stage and he fell down and died. And here I'm standing here looking at, because Dad was being honored in this event as one of the lasting survivors. And it was a full circle moment for him.
Yeah.
That was, kind of lovingly haunting. And I just remember the wistful look on his face, like he came full circle in his family.
Man.
Yeah. There's all kinds of stories, and
Well, I hope you do the
so
book. I hope you do the book, or are you writing the book? Are you the
oh,
author?
I'm already on the 5th chapter, and I get chills telling you about it because I started the book from the age of 8 to 18 when I didn't have my father and brother.
Okay.
And shared about my life because I had a stepfather who was a drummer. His name was Robert Glucksman. And I grew up, from age 8 to 18 with him as a stepfather. I'm on the 5th chapter now, and I'm bringing up stuff that I haven't thought about in years. And I had to stop for a minute and just sort of digest what I was feeling and remembering. So I'm working on to chapter 6 now. Because there's stories I don't want to tell.
Yeah.
That would probably want to know. So I'm sort of siphoning my thought process that makes sense in a flow that people would appreciate hearing these stories and my reactions to them.
All that stuff. I mean, it's just one of my favorite things in terms of history is, what's his name? Lauren Schoenberg sat down with Mel Lewis and did a long interview with Mel. And so tell me about Buddy Rich, Mel. So Mel, tell me about Shadow Wilson and what a treasure that exists. And there's so many players that, well, there's 75, 76, and hey, you really ought to sit. Nah, I'm too young. I'm not. And Freddie Gruber and Buddy Rich, with their project, it never happened. So it's great that you're doing that.
I took a shot at jazz radio. I'm known as the woman of jazz. That's my moniker. And I really enjoyed it because I sort of did what you just explained. I would bring on some of those, mentors and ask them questions if they had a new release and whatever. I'd always acknowledge that. But I went in more into, the inner workings of being a musician in the industry during that time. And I would get those, pearls of wisdom instead of like, who was your piano teacher and what's your favorite song? I went in, tell me about who you are and what you learned. I really enjoy doing that. I called them jazz commercials.
You still have them?
Oh, yeah. I have all of them. Duffy, I don't know if you heard about Kathy Rich and I did a tribute to Buddy at Carnegie Hall.
Okay.
And after he passed, my brother was on the show, and he sort of touched in the style of Gene and then Buddy, back and forth and what he was playing. And it was such a moment of reverence of what Buddy had poured into the drum world. And till this day, I mean, all the up-and-comers look at Buddy as the greatest drummer in the world.
Nobody.
And I believe he was too.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, there have been many great drummers, but nobody had the command of the instrument that Buddy had. No,
his passion, you couldn't cap his passion and his meticulousness. I mean, when I remember there was a time while we were on tour, he didn't like air conditioning. It used to freeze him up, and I remember him looking, and he was playing, and he was looking at me off stage, and he was taking his hand with the stick, pointing to his neck and the back of his back, and I'm like, what are you trying to tell me? And he was telling me to tell them to turn the air conditioning off because it was coming down on his neck so bad that it was challenging him.
Okay.
And I finally figured it out. He just expected excellence out of everybody that was in his band. There were no excuses.
Yep.
So everybody rose to what they knew they had to say that they were part of the Buddy Rich band, including me when I sang with. I couldn't believe my first gig was with the Buddy Rich Orchestra. What is that?
Did you perform with Kathy and Buddy's band at the Bottom Line?
Yes. Yeah. One gig we did.
Yeah, I think I was at that.
Did I sound okay? Do you remember?
Boy, Kathy sounds great, but man, who are those two? My honest reaction was I was so into Buddy that to have singers in his band was a bit of an affront to my jazz snobbery at the time. But
it was his daughter. Everything was about Kathy.
Right.
So,
but it was. So. I remember the music. Were there some Pointer Sister songs in there? I'm trying to remember what the song was.
Jump for my lover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it must have been all right. I remembered it all these many years later. So
Yeah, and Kathy made sure that he was, up with the up-and-comer drummers in the rock world, because she's really a rock star.
Yeah.
She really loves rock, but she can sing jazz, but her heart is in rock, and she dresses like a rocker. Yeah, she's beautiful. We've been very close friends for years.
So I wanted to ask you more from your managing business end of music perspective, what you think of streaming music and Spotify and all that, and what that has done to musicians' ability to promote themselves, but also to earn a living. I know with Neil Peart from Rush, talking to him, and he was saying that right about the time he was retiring, the industry was shifting into streaming, and he said that he had been counting on album sales and living off this comfortable annuity, and what that meant, what the transition to digital meant, was that annuity was gone.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard to define, because these musicians are not getting paid anything for their music that's streamed. And I don't know when it's going to change. They're trying to, get their voice out there for it to be looked at. The only way I can look at it as it's further promotion for who they are and what they do on different platforms, and you sort of relinquish to it in some way now until they figure out how to pay them better as additional promotional support for their artistry in areas where they normally wouldn't be heard on platforms. That's the only thing I can say, because it's really unfair that they make a couple of pennies, even that, and they have all these streams, and Spotify's walking away with all the money, and it's pissing a lot of people off. And those people need to, come together and go after it.
Yep.
I don't know how they do that other than through Congress, maybe. We don't want to get political. But the musicians, are always the ones that come in and save whatever the event is. And they should be paid for their knowledge just like anyone else gets paid.
Yeah, I mean, they can't be expected to do this for nothing.
Well, no, I would get fired from jobs. And when I was an entertainment director, and I was, booking the acts for these, high-paid industrials and shows and so forth, the owner of one of the companies took me aside and said, "You are more for the musician than for my company."
Yeah.
And I said, "I'm sorry, but they have families and they need to eat too.
Yeah.
And they're going to be saving your show, so don't balk at what their price is." Because when musicians would tell me what their fee is, I'd say, "Okay, thank you." I would never negotiate with them. Never.
Really?
No, I wouldn't, because that's what they need to survive. That's what their self-worth was and their artistry. And I'm going to say to them, "Can you come down $400? No. Thank you for telling me what you're worth, and I'll put it in the budget." I got called out on that for it, but somebody had to do it.
When you were on when the shoe was on the other foot, when you were managing Duffy, and you would work out a price with a club owner, let's say, and then Duffy would...
Acceptable, yeah. Yeah, he'd undermine me because he thought the gig was exciting and he wanted to do it, and all these other players were coming. And I'd say, "Hold on to your excitement and let me do what I do."
Is there wisdom in, we've all heard this, that musicians can undercut themselves and they're more likely to get a gig by raising their prices than by coming in too low? Like their value? How much do you value yourself?
Well, yeah. It's just like any job that you're going to get. You're going to walk in knowing what your family needs and what you feel you're worth. And when they say, how much are you looking for, on an annual basis or whatever it is. And I would always present, this is how much it costs. This is what his per diem is. This is what we need for accommodations and flights and ground, all that stuff.
Yep.
And yeah, he wants to walk away with what he's worth. And when people would try to negotiate with me, I'd let them do their dance, and I'd say the same figure over again. Monty Alexander taught me how to do that.
Yep.
But there were times if I felt that it was a very high-end gig,
yeah,
and politically would be great for Duffy, and I'd kind of work with them if they had a budget that needed some workability, and they appreciated me for it. But I wouldn't come down too far that it would hurt Duffy.
Yeah.
Because he's the one coming in there giving that wonderful energy that he brought everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he was hurting, just like Buddy. Duffy didn't have, the easiest life physically. And, they called him the bionic drummer. Both of his legs were stunted, and his hip operations, really was a struggle for him. But it was his passion, it was his drive, it was his love for his art and the people who loved it. All he wanted to do was make people happy, mm-hmm. and put the grin on the groove and aim the beat at your feet. And then he knew that his job, was done.
Yep.
And would come home and say, let's eat.
You'd say, fine, just don't take your shoes off.
Yeah, exactly. Just as long as you don't take your shoes off, I'm good. We would laugh. And we had so many fun, moments together, not only as sister and brother, but as peers in the industry. And he taught me a lot and introduced me to people that could teach me more. And I really feel like I had a valuable education in the industry on the level of not only personally understanding what it takes to get on a bandstand, but remuneration of what you just gave to the people was important to know was coming.
Yep.
So that was my quest, and until this day, I do the same thing, and I consult people, and I listen to who they are and where they're going, and I get messages for them. Have you tried this? Why don't you look at this? Look at social media. Have you tried, coming on and doing certain things? And they go, no, I've never had it.
Yeah.
So, I've learned the game on each side, and I impart what I feel people need as I learn about who they are and work with them.
Yeah. And
it's a joy. I love seeing them grow and being a part of, who they are and my little stamp on their journey. It's a blessing for my life.
You had talked about when you were on radio interviewing musicians and finding out more about what made them tick. For Duffy, what made Duffy tick when he was not involved in drums? Did he have interests, passions?
Let me think about that.
Okay.
Duffy was all about educating people about jazz. And that was very important to him. And he would always make it fun for the learning process. That whenever he would see someone struggling with understanding time, mm-hmm. he would really give them that grace so they could find it. And he would acknowledge them when they found it. He just was more personable in his teaching, and he made music fun. But outside of music, Duffy would be composing. He'd be on the piano. He'd be singing. He was a horrible flugelhorn player. He would pick it up and try to blow it. It would be the most hysterical thing you ever heard. But as far as the rhythm section instruments, he had them down. And everything was geared toward music and or his family life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was one story I'll leave you with.
Okay.
We went to, it was my brother and sister and myself and my dad, and we were in Manhattan. We just went to go have some Chinese food, and we were going to go turn Dad onto the movie Fame.
Okay.
It just came out. And so I don't need to tell you that during the movie, Dad was snoring. And we had kept elbowing him like, Dad, come on. And he was like, oh, okay. And so when we left, we're walking down Broadway, and at the corner of 48th Street and Broadway, there was a trio where it was the drummer had a snare drum, mm-hmm. but he was using his trap case as the bass drum.
Yeah.
And one cymbal, and the bassist was playing acoustic bass, and the piano player was on a little makeshift Casio. And we walked over, and people were sort of, and they had a box or a guitar case in front of them to throw money in. Well, Dad and Duff looked at each other like, you want to help him out a little bit, make some money? And he said, let's ask him if we could sit in. And they said, yeah. So Dad and Duff, Duff sits there with the trap case and the snare and the thing, and and Dad, takes the guy's bass, and they went into, C Jam Blues or something.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, we had a crowd on that corner that was throwing money into that thing. My sister and I were laughing so hard we almost peed because we couldn't believe that they sat in and did this and what just occurred. And the musicians whose places they took were looking like, what's going on here right now? Look at the money that we're making. And the people gave applause, and then Dad and Duffy handed the sticks and the bass back to them, and we walked off, and my father looked at me and he said, that's how it's done.
Wow. That's a great
And then
story.
we just, walked along. And so that was a moment in time that I will always remember, just that improvisational heart that they both had, that they would just jump in and do something like that to help other musicians pay their bills.
All right.
But